Cool. Yeah, the way I normally approach content is to do whatever suits for that individual. So, someone like John Dumas, who's got Entrepreneur on Fire, he's a really great talker, a great people person, a really charismatic person to have on the audio. He's the kind of guy you want doing a podcast. If you're kind of boring and um, not very animated and exciting, then podcasting probably isn't for you. And in my case, I find the best content I do is written content. I don't really know why. Maybe because I can type quickly. Maybe because my podcasts are average and I don't appear well on video. I don't really know, but for whatever reason, the written stuff is good. And I've seen a lot of guys do video stuff. Guys who are good at it do it really well. Guys who aren't well suited to it, um, it just doesn't seem to work. So the number one tip would be pick. You can try a bunch of stuff, but pick whatever's getting traction and what really resonates. And it might not be terms of a specific trick. It might just be something that you're particularly good at or an angle you're particularly good at. Might be long and detailed posts, or it might be infographics or podcasting or video, or it might be just going on other podcasts. I do a lot of going on other people's podcasts, and I find that much easier to manage. I can do a lot more of that than I can do my own podcast. So I do 3 or 4 of these a week, and I find that quite easy to manage. And that's, like then I do 1 or 2 posts a week, and that's one piece of content every day. So just do what works for you and test a bunch of stuff to figure that out, I think is probably the best advice.
So basically, we just need to figure out what's working for us and what feels right for us, and then try to tweak the content to see the maximum results that we can get.
Yeah, and what we do is highly actionable content, which I kind of just discovered that's what I was good at writing, and that's what people liked from our content. That may not be the case for everyone else. There might be other things. There's some people who write really stuff that really gets people emotionally, or stuff that's really entertaining, or stuff that's controversial or contrarian in some way. That kind of stuff works. Whatever it is for you, I think if you do a lot of content, you'll gradually start to figure that out, especially if you're really actively engaging with the community, and just do more of that is basically what we've done.
Yeah. To start off this conversation, what kind of sites can we build with WordPress? It started as a blogging system only, and it grew organically over the years, and now there are other blogging systems just coming to the market because they say WordPress is too blown up with everything. What kind of sites do you use WordPress for?
I don't think there's any kind of site you can't use WordPress for. I mean, when I started with WordPress, it was seen primarily as a blogging platform, and there's this stereotypical WordPress as a blogging platform with a layout where you've got the header at the top and the sidebar and the footer and your blog posts, but that's just CSS. All that is layout, and it's also the way that you query the database. And I think that you can do with custom queries, with metadata, with custom post types, you can do pretty much anything you want with the data that's held in a WordPress database. So you can bend it to your will, which is something I really enjoy doing. The book I'm writing at the moment, which is called WordPress Site Blueprints for Pact, and that actually takes the reader through, I think, 10 different types of website that you could build with WordPress. So it looks at e-commerce, it looks at a video streaming site, social media site, buddy press, multi-site, a whole range of different applications for WordPress, and shows readers how to build those sites using WordPress. So I think that shows that there's lots of different options and there's lots of flexibility with WordPress.
Awesome. That's something that I've experienced in working with my clients as well. Do you think you need some basic technical understanding to build these more complex sites with WordPress, or can just anybody do it by picking the right theme and plugin?
I think it depends how custom you want your site to be. I think there's a lot you can do with some of the really powerful plugins. I mean, for example, if you're building an e-commerce site, WooCommerce, and there are other e-commerce plugins as well, is free, and you can do a lot with it. I've built e-commerce sites for clients where I've used WooCommerce, and I've also bought premium add-ons, the plugins that they sell as well, because the client has needed a little bit more. But I think for most stores, something like WooCommerce will do a lot that you already need. And that there are other plugins out there that have got some really advanced functionality. There are more and more premium plugins that are really, really good and are really pushing the limits in terms of what you can do with a plugin now. But there are still some good free ones as well. So I think there is quite a lot of scope for people who aren't coders to build themselves a really good site with WordPress. I think the challenge is in finding a theme that works in the way they need it to and fits their site. Because you often find that people try doing that and do it themselves, and then after a couple of years they realize it's not quite working for them, so they end up coming to a developer to get them to do it for them. But I think as long as you get your code from a reputable source and you spend time getting recommendations, there's some really good stuff out there. But as a developer, I will always say there's even more that you can do if you hire a developer who can create a custom theme and write plugins to make your site do exactly what you need it to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Does WordPress work for larger organizations or more traditional organizations as well? Because working with my clients, I experience some maybe some hesitancy using WordPress when you're speaking to a more traditional organization.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a perception that WordPress is a blogging platform, and that can sometimes get in the way. I think sometimes large private sector organizations can get sort of stuck on the fact that WordPress is free, and so they therefore think that it's not worth much. So I mean, on WordPress.org it says but WordPress is free, but it's also priceless. And it is, and I think it's amazing that we've got a community of developers who create and develop and push WordPress and expand it in such a way that we don't have to pay for it. But I think it's because it's now powering so many sites. I think that's tailing off. I think there's less resistance to it. There are some huge sites out there using WordPress and some big brands, BBC America, NASA, the Telegraph. Some really big sites. I mean, even Google are using WordPress. And, if there's any organization that have got the expertise to do it themselves, it's Google. But they're using WordPress as well. And there's a lot of local government organizations in the UK using WordPress. Some of those are huge. So, I think it's becoming less of an issue for them.
When it comes to deciding which host is good for me to get started with a website, what do we need to know about the different kinds of WordPress hosting?
Sure. It's not always true that you get what you pay for, but maybe you could say it's roughly true, right? And it kind of makes sense. I mean, $3 a month is very, very cheap, but you know what you paid for your laptop, and servers are more expensive than that, right? So $3 a month, they couldn't just put 2 customers on there and make money, right? So, and again, there's a phone number you can call and tickets you can open if you have questions, and that costs money because there's a human on the other end of that, right? So there's this you can sort of just do the math, and there's this sort of minimum, or you could actually say maximum level of service you could possibly get from a company, depending on the price, just because otherwise they could never make money there, right? So if you're paying $3 a month, again, you're going to share a physical server with thousands of other customers because you have to make money. And you're not going to get a lot of attention on the phone or on tickets and so on, and when you call, because they can't, right? They would lose money if they talk to you for a couple hours. They would lose money for a year on you, right? So it's okay. It's just the trade-off, right? That's not I'm not actually using that as a pejorative. It's just math, right? So on the other hand, it's not necessarily true that you spend tons of money and then get tons of value. Maybe not, right? But certainly, if you're not spending a lot of money, there's a limit to how fast can the site be, how much traffic can it take, because how much of that server can they allocate to you, and same thing for service. So there are the shared hosting companies, as they're called. So these are big names that you might have heard of, like GoDaddy and Bluehost, DreamHost, HostGator. So these are companies that have many customers. They're very, very cheap. They pretty much all have the same features, literally, like they often even use the same screens to help you manage your site. It's literally the same software. So they're very much identical, which is actually part of why the prices are low, because when you have a bunch of services all identical, really the only thing you have to compete on is price. And so that's good for consumers in the sense that the price goes very low. It also means, they're so. But again, low prices means they can't afford to do very much in terms of hosting or human service. So they're all very similar and all very cost effective, and that's good. What I like to say is at some point, and many people maybe never get to this point, and that's fine, but at some point you may get to a point where you really care whether your site's fast or slow, or you care if it stays up, if you get traffic. You care that it not be hacked. You care what happens when you call. And again, when you get started, you may not, and that's a perfectly fine choice. But at some point, you do care, and at that point, saving $20 a month by paying $5 instead of $25 is not a great trade-off. On the one hand, the internet is great because you could access anyone in the world. Your AdWord could be seen by anyone, your tweet could be seen by anyone, and so on. The trouble is that's true of everyone, and so there's an insane amount of competition, both from people like you that have more time than money to put at it, as well as big companies that have tons of money to throw at it also and buy attention, right? And so on the one hand, it feels like, oh, this will be great because I can go do whatever, but the trouble is that's times a billion people. And so it's still really hard. Some people would say harder than ever to get attention and enough attention, to get a company going. And so what I would say is it's going to be rare to hear someone say, the reason my company failed was I picked the wrong plugin from my Twitter feed on the sidebar. Or conversely, the reason my startup worked was because I bought this theme instead of that theme, and that made all the difference. These are not things people say on either side of success or failure in small business, right? So what can we conclude from that? Number one, it's the product and distribution to customers that matters the most. Number two, you should just decide on these things like what a site should look like and how it should work and my hosting company and all that stuff. Just decide and move on. You don't want to spend a lot of cycles thinking about it. You don't want to just pick something ugly or useless, of course, but you don't want to dawdle for a month or two and tweaking every last thing because that's not what's going to do it. So that's not a good use of time. Get going, get something that's good enough and move forward. So if SEO is an important strategy for you, then you will want to use a good SEO plugin and think about content strategy and how guest posting and social media and your own content will work with that. That's also a long road to hoe. Content marketing is the gift that keeps on giving, but it takes a long time to get that flywheel going. Yeah. So for example, on my blog, I now have 50,000 RSS subscribers. So when I post, I get hundreds of retweets pretty much every time. It took me 8 years to get to that point. Actually, I would say it took like 4 or 5 years to get to that point, and then of like tens of thousands of active readers. But for a long time, there was like 100. Like 18 months, there was 100, 200, and that's it, which isn't enough to do anything, right?